Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today we have a professional development session on governance. So we have Alistair and Ava Alistair, our CEO, and Ava is his EA. So they're going to talk to us a little bit about how the governance works, the structure, and a little bit about the strategy. And then Katie is going to have a little follow-on session talking about our values and how this all fits in. So I'm just going to hand over to Ava first.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's 12:04, so I can say good afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen. I don't need to try this. Oh, God. So many things open in my screen at the moment. Hang on. Right. Can I view this? Well, I guess it's a way of showing it. So this is our current organogram. This is the key to kinds of arrows and lines. So we have the board of directors, council, and 4 standing committees that meet quarterly. Would you like to take over from here, Alistair, if that's okay?
Okay, so I'll just talk through that diagram a little bit. So we've got a number of sort of entities there that you may have heard of, or some of you have been elected to or involved with directly. We have a board of directors that has the same function as the directors of any company. They are directors in company law. We are a slightly unusual organisation because we have a royal charter, which means that we're exempt from some of the reporting requirements of an ordinary company. So we are registered with Companies House, but we are exempt from publishing our accounts and some of the other things that Companies House registration normally requires you to do. At the moment, we have a board of 11, which is chaired by the president. 6 of those 11 are elected by council. 3 of them are elected directly by all voting members, and they are, if every year we have an election for president-elect. So at any one time, we have 3 presidents on our board. We have the current year's president. We have the recently elected president-elect who's waiting to take on their term. And we have the immediate past president who served as a year as president and remains on the board for another year. So those 3 positions are elected directly by all members every year. And if you don't remember electing a president anytime recently, that's because we've not had a contested election for several years. So I think the last time we had a contested election was in 2020. And ever since then, we've only had one candidate to be president. So that's one of the reasons why we've undertaken this year's governance review, because we're not getting very many people who want to stand to be president. And so that's one of the issues we've thought about, and whether we could, what could we do to make that more attractive or encourage more people to stand. So on the board of 11, there are 3 who are elected directly. There are 6 who are elected indirectly by council. And then at the moment, we have 2 board members who are proposed by the president. So if we go back a long way, before I was chief executive, probably back 20 years or so, we didn't have elections at all for a board. The president was elected, and then they chose their board from their own network. So electing a board was an innovation, and having these 2 people who were co-opted by the president is just a kind of legacy hangover from those days. And the idea is really the president can bring in people who have skills that aren't found or aren't particularly strong among those directors who are elected. So sometimes we might bring on somebody who has a particular background in product development or startups or international activity or whatever it might be. And sometimes they're just people who the president knows and thinks are a good source of general, wise counsel, and wants to have them on the board for kind of those general purposes. So that's how our board is currently made up of 11. We have 4 standing committees. By standing committees, we mean like basically we always have them. They don't come and go. Those committees are there every year. They meet regularly. They've got a program of work which they oversee. And usually they are chaired by a board member. Not always. Sometimes we don't have enough board members who are able to take on the chairing of those committees, but generally speaking, they are. At the moment, finance, coordinating, and equity, diversity, and inclusion are chaired by board members, and professional practice committee is not chaired by a board member because there wasn't somebody who was able to take that on. So members obviously directly elect the president. So there are 3 presidents sitting on the board. Members also directly elect council, and it's council who elects the 6 members of the board who are indirectly elected. So where we say members on this diagram, that actually means voting members. So full members, MCIPR, fellows, FCIPR, and honorary FCIPRs are allowed to vote in our elections and at a general meeting. Students, global affiliates, and associates and affiliates don't have the vote. So it's probably about 85% of members who have the vote, and they're the ones who are responsible for the voting, which are the two big transparent arrows you can see going up from the bottom. Council has a maximum size of 30, although generally it's been smaller than that, usually between 22 and 25, depending on how many people put themselves forward. I mentioned that we've not had contested elections for president very often in recent years. We've also not had enough people coming forward to stand for election in order to fill council. And so that's another reason for wanting to look at our governance and see if we can update it. The groups are kind of a bit off on a side here. The groups don't have a direct role. Members obviously elect, members choose the groups they want to belong to, and they can volunteer to support the work of those groups, and they may decide to go on the committees. The groups have AGMs, and their committees are elected at those AGMs by members. And members also have the right to nominate to council, which is why you see that dot and dash line from group committees to council. So at the moment, all of the groups are able to nominate somebody or more than one person if they want to stand for election to council. And then we have a relatively complicated system which assigns different sets of seats to different types of groups. So we have 8 seats which are assigned to national and regional groups, 8 to sector groups, 8 which are open to anybody not nominated, people who are not nominated by a group but nominated themselves. And then on top of that we have the 3 presidents. So that's how it works at the moment. That system has been there more or less for about 10 years. We did do a significant reform 10 years ago, which was to kind of change the balance of power between board and council, because until 2014 it was our council who were directors, actually. So we had a much larger council, and everybody who was on council was a director, and the board was just like a kind of management committee. So that changed in 2014, and we're looking at changing it again this year, really to keep up with emerging good practice in other organizations. So the proposals are to address some of the issues that I've mentioned, to try and get more people to stand for election to the president, to get rid of the old 2 members co-opted by the board, to replace them with more people elected by council, to slightly reduce the size of council to reflect the fact that In fact, we pretty much never have 30 people. And to get rid of these rather elaborate seat grouping system on council, so that groups under the new system will be able to continue nominating people, people will be able to continue nominating themselves. And we will have a new nominations committee. So we'll actually have a fifth committee that goes in under there, and the nominations committee will be responsible for vetting anybody who wants to put themselves forward as a candidate. So that's, you know, sort of a general introduction to where we are now and what is coming over the next few months. So rather than talking at greater length, I'll probably just stop and see if anybody's got points or questions they want to make.
Thanks, Alistair. That's really useful to understand, actually, and hearing you talk it through. That was make sense of it, because although I've been involved in CIPR for a long time, always feels, I suppose, difficult to understand. That's probably just my own space and time to understand it. That nomination process, but I'm interested in that new nominations committee. Will they have any scope outside of nominating council? Will they get involved in other nominations like fellowship, for example, or anything else around that?
No. There's a separate process for nomination of fellows. There's a separate process for nomination of honorary fellows. The only thing the nominations committee will deal with is people who want to stand for elected office.
Okay.
So people who want to stand for election to council and people who want to stand for election to board. And one of the things I didn't really mention that we are more actively and more explicitly looking for is to have non-members standing. So we for the last 10 years, we have been able to have non-members, both on board and on council, actually. We've had one or two non-members on council, but it's really, I mean, they were non-members, but they were PR practitioners, and it's very, you know, very exceptional. We have had some non-members on the board, but not that many, probably only half a dozen in the last 10 years. But there's a sense really that it's harder for a board to function effectively if almost everybody on the board is of a similar professional background. And it's better to have people, some people think it's very important to have particular skills like finance or HR, whatever. I think it's important really just to have people who are different. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you could have run a successful company chartering yachts, or you could have worked in retail, or you could have, you know, started your own brand of soap on your kitchen table. But, you know, anybody who's done those sorts of things will have perspectives on our work which are going to be useful to us. And so one of the things that we actively want to do in future is have more of those kinds of outsiders who can contribute to our governance. Although the majority will always be members. So the majority on the board will be members. There's a maximum threshold of 1/3 of non-members, which, you know, it's not like we're aiming to get a third, that's just the upper limit. But we hope to get more than just the odd individual, which is what we've had up to now.
I think that's a good idea. Really good. Thank you.
Alistair, just quickly, having worked in other membership organizations as well, they also are having similar discussions and have also struggled with getting people to stand for council and then going from council onto the board and onto the board to being president. Are we trying to articulate anything around an ideal path to presidency so that we have a clearer sort of succession, clearer idea of succession planning, but also a clearer route of roles that people should have, you know, in any sort of order to get up to that point?
We're not, and if anything, I would say that we're probably doing the opposite to some extent, because the governance working group has basically, their feeling is that we tend to get a lot of people with fairly similar backgrounds standing for everything, actually, standing for council, then deciding to stand for board, and then becoming president. And they're very, very reluctant to recommend pathways towards things. That's just not an approach that they're kind of comfortable with. I think one of the things they have done is try to be much clearer about the role of the president in particular. And one of I think every president who I've worked with in recent years has felt the task, no matter how well prepared they were, to be, really daunting, and in some cases overwhelming. I mean, it's an enormous amount of work, and some of our members actually think it's a paid job when it's not. It's a volunteer role, the same as being a group chair. But the amount of responsibility you carry, the number of people you have to engage with, the range of things you are expected to have a view on and contribute to, is just enormous. And so one of the changes that we're proposing is to allow the president to be more focused, and we hope that that will attract people who particularly want to play an advocacy role. So at the moment, the president chairs all the meetings of the board and all the meetings of council, and is responsible for kind of marshalling all the business and making sure all the papers are ready and all that kind of thing. And that's a kind of fairly big task, which in a larger organization would probably be done by a company secretary. And so the reason why we're proposing to have an independent chair is to really take that kind of operational, the management of the governance out of the president's role, so that the president in future will be able to focus more on being the representative of the profession. They will have more time, hopefully, to go and meet members around the country, and more time to speak up on behalf of the profession, rather than, as they are at present, being very much chained down to a strict timetable of meetings for all. The president doesn't sit on all these committees. The president has 4 meetings of council, 4 meetings of the board. They've got other things that they attend. It's a lot. And so we hope that by not being prescriptive about pathways and being more clear about the kind of role that the president will play, that will help encourage people to come forward.
Can I just add a quick comment onto the back of that, Alistair? I think that with everything you were just saying, I think one of the other advantages will be we should be able to have more people that are in big agencies, but not necessarily right at the top, people that are in-house, so where you are more beholden to an employer rather than necessarily running your own organisation. That should then make it, which gives us a greater scope of senior volunteers and senior practitioners to pull from in the future, rather than those that are able to flex diaries a little bit more.
Are there any more questions for Alistair or Ava before Katie takes over? No, I think it's over to you then, Katie.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my session is a bit more into the weeds of committees, and having been involved with CIPR for a long time in various guises along the way, and especially CIPR Inside, I've seen some of the challenges. This year I'm co-chairing with my co-chair Becky, who's on this course today. And when we started out, we're like, right, we want to be really clear, not just because we are co-chairing together, but just to help us manage our group and our work and our expectations of ourselves and on the rest of the volunteers. We may not have got it perfect, that's my caveat up front, but this has kind of been our approach. And I've seen that some others as well, I think it's Andy West from the Greater London group, has done something similar in the way that he manages his group. I'll share my screen. Right, it's going to let me. Oh, you need to unshare your organogram before I can share my slides. Eva, can you take that off? Thank you. So hopefully everyone can see that. So as a committee, we wanted to kind of bring together our values, the strategy, everything that CIPR head office is kind of working on. And as a disclaimer up front, I'm involved with CIPR and its values and helped with Jackie Lefebvre help the organisation surface its values. So the values are inherently closer to me, and I've helped in terms of giving a couple of presentations to members, and we worked in our volunteer event as well, didn't we, back in 21, 22 on that. So I have a bit of, I suppose, secret knowledge or advanced knowledge. So when we looked at our approach, we looked at our committee, we wanted to build on our strengths and build on the past. We feel like it's one of those long-standing committees. In fact, it's 20 years this year, we've discovered. So we've been around a while. There's a lot of strength in that, and we kind of wanted to build on that. And also internal comms has been put on the map through the pandemic. The spotlight was put on us as a sort of sector within communications. And a lot of our members are really sort of stuck with us, but we felt that it was time to kind of give something back to them. And this year was maybe by chance when some of us had recovered a little bit from the pandemic, dare I say, we just felt like we must have had a bit more energy back in the room to be able to deliver a bit more. So what we did to look at that was the strategy. So we used the 2020 to 24 strategy, which I know is in development now. So it's obviously going to shift a bit. We looked at the presidential points of focus. We looked back at Rachel's and Advita's nomination statements in their areas of focus. We looked at the values, and then we thought, well, okay, what do we want to do as a committee, and how can we help that guide us and keep us on track? Because it's very easy, as any committee will know, to have loads of amazing ideas, not enough time, not enough discipline, skills, and also control really to deliver it all. We kind of come in and out as committee members. Some of us will drop off because it's a voluntary role, will disappear and say, I'm really sorry, families come first, and this is what happens. And it's trying to manage that. So CIPR strategic roles, we looked at that strategy piece, practice development, all of the things we should all know and understand, although I know I will shift soon. But how do we support those strategic aims of the organisation and advocate for what we're doing at the same time as understanding what our presidential focus areas were? So we took those 3 focus points, so I summarised there from Rachel and Advita. We found that there's obviously some similarities there in terms of accessibility and our community, and there's like those sort of those threads that feed through each sort of presidential year. You know, okay, for us as a group, how do we support that? And then we looked at our values: advancing our community, using our voice, being human, tuning in, and purposefully curious. How do they help us as a committee deliver what we want to do, but also make sure that we're supporting the wider organisational push for CIPR, and that we kind of stay aligned without being too rigid about it, but also managing our own time and expectations. So they were really sort of helpful for that. I think for us, community, because again, it's the top one for our values, but it was the most important aspect for us in our group. We wanted to really support our internal communicators. We know that many of them work in sort of solo in their teams, in their organisations. They could be very small teams. They could feel quite isolated. They rely and need those networks and communities more than perhaps some of the more established groups of communications specialism. And sort of, I think being human as well comes down to a really important one for us in internal comms. So but they're all there playing their part. But those 2 are probably the ones that are really important for us. Let's just move on. So we tried to keep it simple in terms of what we decided to do and what we wanted to do as a committee. So we just decided, we thought, right, okay, we'll just look at what the presidential focus areas are. Okay, and then what we want to do as a committee. We knew that we wanted to keep it simple, so we keep ourselves focused on delivering some really great content, building and actually supporting our internal comms community, because we know CIPR Insider's got a good following. There's a lot of people that subscribe to us through our membership and our newsletters, but also through our social platforms as well. And also that sense of giving back to our members. We had historically done a lot of work. We'd run conferences before the pandemic. We had run an awards, we've done quite a lot of papers and research. So I think in terms of committees and specialists, we've been quite active, and obviously the pandemic just shifted all of that and meant that our time was, as individual professionals out doing our jobs, we just got so busy that as a committee, we haven't been able to probably deliver as much as we had historically. So we felt that there was a need to pick up on that bit. So I like to use this sort of rough model. It's basically got our values at the bottom and then what we were going to do. So we've got that great content, etc., coming through on that second layer, and then the aspect of in terms of what we want to do in terms of our alignment to presidential focus areas right in the middle on that third layer, and then there's strategy from CIPR as a whole on that fourth, and at the very top our vision as an organization. So those values are very much forming the foundation and helping us kind of stay on track. They're like just some guide rails, if you like, just kind of help us when we start to veer out and somebody goes and gets kind of some wild but creative idea, and we think, actually, is this the best use of our time right now as a committee? Is this what we should be doing? The values are there to help us kind of keep ourselves on track. And similarly, when you're facing challenges, when there might be, I don't know, conflicts of interest or, you know, difficult situations to manage, when people come to us because they see that we're an active committee and people are asking us for favors and support, and actually, is this aligned to CIPR values? I need to put my CIPR hat on and think about that aspect of my role as a chair and my responsibility that I'm guiding and supporting the brand and reflecting the brand of CIPR. So the values are there as that foundation and really important sort of, like I say, guide rail for us. Jackie describes them always as a bit of a North Star. So they just sort of keep you on track. They don't necessarily keep you on the path all the way, but they're there just to keep you focused on what you're trying to sort of do. So hopefully that makes sense there. A simpler version of it, just with a bit of a. So, like I say, values keep us on track. They also help us to keep a check on how we interact with each other as a committee. So while we might, we are a big committee, lots of different voices, lots of different perspectives, and lots of different abilities as well. We're all at different stages on our careers, experiences. We really want to help people grow and learn. So we want to focus on helping them do what they can do, but also not making them feel bad when they can't do something. Those values are there to help us keep ourselves on track. Yeah, how they sort of help us manage that balance between all those great ideas. A new committee always comes in full of brimming with ideas, full of them, but it's actually can be quite overwhelming. And it's a filter, really. It helps us kind of filter out the best bits and think about, okay, is it really helping us deliver what we want to deliver? Helps us guide with how we meet together. We set out really clear boundaries in terms of, you know, doing our work. We engaged with our volunteers in our group to find the best way to work together. So we were trying to be really approachable with people in different time zones and different requirements from both sort of family commitments and religious commitments, etc., so that recognize that certain times and certain days are not appropriate for everybody. So we tried as best possible to be flexible in our approach to our meetings. Also allowing people to catch up on meetings if they can't make it, so that we can be sort of quite accessible. We just set ourselves a little bit of a guardrail as well in terms of what we do, being creative and proactive and honest. So if there's something that we can't achieve, that comes through very much. We'll say, well, actually, things aren't working, that's not working for me. And there is a very honest sense around our committee that we're able to say when things aren't quite right. And it's really good that we are open to that. It's not always the case. I think sometimes people just go quiet and disappear in committees, but we'd rather people are able to say to us, and that comes through in that sort of being human value there. Being proactive kind of can also help us in that purposefully curious place where we start to delve into different areas and think about things from a slightly different perspective and bring in different ideas and people. And that probably really played out with our event yesterday, that we worked really hard to bring in different voices that haven't necessarily been seen by our community or heard by our community before. That was such an important aspect for us there. We tried to set some boundaries for everybody and give them an expectation of what an outline of what is expected of them throughout their term. We want them to attend at least 6. I think 1 in every 2 is fair enough. And perhaps to produce some content, to get involved with our events. Obviously, we've just done that massive event, which has involved all of us. So, but then we'll now have the challenge of maintaining some kind of momentum going through for the rest of the year. So we do have a plan in place of some events coming on and keeping that relevant for members whilst not being too onerous on the volunteer members that are delivering that, recognising the heavy lifting for 2024 was very much done between November and now for the summit. And then we set out a bit of an early plan, but obviously that needs to be updated to take us into the next few months. And I think that's about it. So if anybody's got any questions, I will stop sharing and talking and you can ask away. No.
It sounds very quiet today. No questions. Katie, I think that was a great presentation. And how do you find managing your committee members? So if you find some people are not necessarily following your plan, or how do you engage with those members?
I could be quite honest with you guys. It can be quite difficult, and I think that's something actually possibly as a governance perspective, and that's partly my question to, well, partly in the background to my question to Alistair about fellowship and stuff, in terms of how do we set the boundaries, what is acceptable, and when people kind of go off and do their own thing and you end up with those side conversations or people that just go silent. There's a lot, you end up finding yourself as a chair in a role as a leader, vision setting kind of leader, and then this team leader, line manager kind of leader, and thinking, how do I juggle that? And actually from CIPR